The first question for this panel discussion, what's the condition of current lake infrastructure?
Okay, is that close enough?
That'll work, I think.
All right.
Everybody can hear him, right?
All right, I'm
good
Jerry
deal.
Winchester, Executive Director for Tourism and Recreation for the state of Oklahoma. The current situation, certainly, we have the opportunity to work with core properties, with BOR properties, with some lakes that we own ourselves that the state owns. So obviously those properties, we're directly responsible for the quality of the things around them. And what we find is a lot of times there's not a lot of development around those things. And even when we talk about the roads and the infrastructure around those properties, sometimes we share that burden with the Department of Transportation for the state. So when you look at the things that we deal with, they could be road related and have that issue. When you look at our one of our highest attended parks, which is at Beavers Bend, one of the upcoming things around that lake area is water treatment and sewer, and the ability of the people that are wanting to develop in those areas not having a capacity to be able to do that. So a lot of times it's not only just the roads or the things around the lake. There are other things that affect it that certainly we're dealing with from the standpoint of being able to provide the right water, sewer, egress, things of that nature. And so it becomes, some of those are, I'd say, in decent enough condition. Most of them are lacking. And that was, if you listen to the presentation by Deputy Director DeMarco, we talked about a lot of those things and a lot of the challenges.
Richard Lennard, Blackbeard Marine. I would agree with that, and just a lot of the things from the infrastructure standpoint. When you can comparisons with other states, there's things that are being provided that really make people want to come. And the first gentleman that spoke earlier today, when you looked at the maintenance aspects of keeping those things to where you're providing an experience to where that common vision of the state wanting to provide things and business owners there wanting to have something to come to, we are in dire need of some upgrades.
William Jeffries, retired Corps of Engineers. So everybody knows our parks infrastructure is getting old. A little different thought process. I think we need to, as a state, this is a great opportunity for us to evolve on how we structure leases. And as these marinas get older, as your water treatment systems get older and everything, that's where I think in the future we develop the shared vision to where our leases are tailored in a way that they guarantee reinvestment into that resource. That money pretty much stays local. If you develop something on Skytook Lake, we put assurances in there that 10, 15 years from now, as your initial investment starts to age and your maintenance cost starts going up, that we assure that as you're making money and stuff, you're not paying that to the federal government and you're not paying to the state where that money's redirected from the resource. That money now requires X amount to be reinvested into capital improvements to ensure a long-term viable recreational program in Oklahoma. It's a strategy I think we need to give it a lot of thought to. And that would be me as a member of the public. That's going to be kind of my expectation for the state of Oklahoma on how we move forward in the future.
Yeah, I'm Scott Fitzpatrick. I'm the owner of AmeriCorp US. We're out of Missouri, and we're a boat dock manufacturing and construction company. And I'm also the state treasurer for the state of Missouri, and formerly served in the legislature. And I know we have a lot of legislators here today, and legislators helped put this together, as well as Ron. So thank you for that and for what you guys do in the legislature. I think one thing that William said that was very accurate is, I think, the lease structure is important. Austin Cameron mentioned that earlier from Pier 51. And that's the same, we have some of the same issues over in Missouri. When you talk about the current infrastructure, I mean, we go all over the United States at AmeriCorp, and we've been involved in building thousands and thousands of slips in probably 25 states. And so what we see is, as close as we are located to this area, being based in Southwest Missouri, I would expect kind of more of our business to be in Oklahoma than currently is. And I think there's a few things that go into that. One is, there's been a lot of talk about the Corps of Engineers. The Corps is kind of there's not a lot of uniformity necessarily from district to district, and sometimes you get a great person to work with, like you were, and at Keystone, and sometimes you just don't have that luck wherever you go. But I think from a state parks perspective, and I'm probably less familiar with the specific infrastructure issues, but I learned from Gino today, listening to their budget issues, as well as Austin and other folks familiar with it, that it does take commitment from the legislature when you don't have a dedicated source of funding. In Missouri, we have a constitutionally authorized 8-cent sales tax dedicated to state park operations and maintenance, and so we have kind of an advantage in that area where that's in there. It's been reauthorized by the citizens of the state every 10 years, and so there's a built-in advantage. And when you don't have that, it does take a commitment from a budgetary perspective from legislators to make those appropriations. But I think that, to sum it up, there's a lot of opportunities. You guys have a lot of resources here that can be tapped, and fortunately, you've got a good group here, it seems like, in the public sector, and obviously folks in the private sector are looking to leverage that.
My name is J.B. Robinson Jr. I'm the inside sales manager at Hydro Hoist Boat Lifts, part of Shoremaster Hydro Hoist Holdings. We're in North America's largest marine accessory manufacturer, boat docks, boat lifts, dock accessories. And much like Scott, we travel a lot across the nation, internationally as well, so we see a lot of ends of roads and transportation and mobilization. I would say, as far as infrastructure, when we're mobilizing our work crews, road conditions getting to the water in some areas, restrictive road conditions, how wide they might be. Once we arrive at a public location at a lake, how much space is there available at a boat ramp for a mobile work crew to be able to perform to get that end user recreational product out onto the water and to a dock for the consumer. That all plays a very large part into the economic drive of that local area and community. We wear and tear and go through, like most of you that are in an industry like ours, several trucks, several trailers. The flooding process, we know damages our boat ramps. We've lost a few axles on trailers trying to access some of the ramps in drought conditions as well. So having some damage to those ramps does affect us. Infrastructure as far as roads, boat ramps, and a different spin on infrastructure, I would say, that affects a lot of us in Oklahoma that have to do with Lake Eufaula. There's been mention earlier about the shoreline management plan that was released just a few years ago. Highly restrictive. If you read into the language of it, I think the whole thing came out of my printer about that thick when I printed it in the office and read it. A restriction on electric to docks. It suggests alternative power source and a movement to solar, and that's typically only in areas that we see governed by Corps of Engineer lakes. So customers are having to go to a different source of power. So having availability to power whenever mobile crews show up to work at a location for a consumer can also be an issue as far as infrastructure goes.
Next question, is there a need for private investment on Oklahoma lakes? And if so, kind of gauge that need.
Well, I see certainly that we see the need for that. As we've mentioned, we've got RFQs out for docks and those type things. And, we see the fact that we've got several areas, and we've got a couple of lakes, Lake Murray being one of them, where that's a state aid lake, and we have that, but we've seen a lot of development on one side, not much on the other side. So opening up some of these areas for development where we can get that kind of the private, get folks that want to come in and help us put that stuff together, because they're going to have the capital, they have the wherewithal, there's a profit and an incentive in that, and we want them to be able to be successful in doing that. Now, whether it's a dock or any number of other facilities, I mean, we've got everywhere from floating cabins that are concession owned or concession operated. Certainly we have been very and are going to be much more open to those kind of investments to make the parks more attractive. More attractive parks draw more visitors is more revenue to the area, more economic development, less dependency on state funds to do that. So we think those type successes will help us ultimately be more successful in the redevelopment of the park system and to be able to be a better steward of what we've been given by the people of the state of Oklahoma.
Each success feeds another success.
That's correct.
I don't think I have anything to add to that. Just the aspect of the shared vision, the aspect of the resources that are controlled by the state or by the Corps, those are things that as a private owner, you don't have. And when you can come and you can bring those things, you're after the same mission. You're after the things where you want more of the residents of the state to be able to enjoy the lake and be able to have a great place to come. But there's cost factors both ways. Cost factors that we can't afford to do certain things. The other aspect, having a great resource. And when you can bring those two together, you're solving the same problem. You want to provide something better for the residents of your state.
I think the National Park Service, Department of Interior, has a great working model on where P3 investment can supplement your programs. State parks are getting older. Core lakes are getting older. The federal government, they're not going to be pumping as much money into recreation. It is what it is. So that's a reality. That's a given, a known variable. So let's adapt. And there's so many opportunities now for P3. We've identified a lot of barriers. Networking, working together, we can help streamline processes at the state and federal level. I think that's something we need to believe in, and it should be a takeaway when everyone leaves here, that those are expectations that we're going to put upon our congressional delegate in D.C. to start making these changes. I think Governor Stitt has put together an awesome team. Just the fact that we're all here right now, and you're sitting in a product of a P3, agreement. This came at no cost to the taxpayer. Private investment. It's a beautiful asset. Great capital improvement. So I think we need to be repeating projects just like this all over the state of Oklahoma. Whether it's a state lake or a core lake, I think those are realistic goals that we all need to set. And together we're stronger. I mean, we've got to learn to network. We've got to work smarter and develop that shared vision and implement it. You know, everything, you can have the best idea in the world, but if you can't fund it, it's just words on paper. That's where P3, I think, is going to be really beneficial to the state, is providing a viable source of funding to make these capital improvements.
So I think the original question is there a need for private investment on Oklahoma Lakes? And I think the answer is definitely yes. And when you look at in lakes and parks around lakes and things like that, what I've found is somebody who's simultaneously involved in the public sector and the private sector is that typically when it comes to consumers having a positive experience, that is most usually associated with the private sector. So, when you bring in a private sector partner, it's going to result in a better product and it's going to result in a happier consumer. And I think so the answer is yes, there is a need. And I think that the way to achieve that is almost always going to be, what we heard from GRDA. You look at Grand Lake, and you look at how it compares to a lot of other lakes. And when you come to Missouri, Lake of the Ozarks is kind of an example, which maybe got a little out of hand, but it's an example where when there's a willingness or cooperation between the governing or the regulatory entity and the private sector, a lot can get done. And I think that that willingness and that how can we get to yes approach from the regulatory side is how you can really achieve some really good things across the state.
And I think everybody up here is just automatically, all of us in the room are going to say, yes, we do need it. Yes, there is room. And once again, I'm going to take you trickle on down the line. Products such as ours as a manufacturer are discretionary products to an end user in the market. They generate sales. They generate sales income, tax income for the state, the county, the local city. To give you an idea, whenever I get asked a question, is there a need? To me, I need to justify that to you by percentages and by numbers. And I'll share a few numbers with you. When we came out of the financial decline, starting 2006, ranging into 2009, we restabilized up until about 2012 into our pre-financial crisis numbers and went back to our regular sales volumes. By 2014, we had achieved a really nice solid number. In 2014, our Hydro Hoist of Oklahoma territory, which is encompassing all of Kansas and Oklahoma, less Lake Texoma, okay? During that period of 2014 through this year, Hydro Hoist as a whole doubled the size of the company in sales. Nationwide, it doubled. Texas outgrew Oklahoma by 230%. Tennessee outgrew Oklahoma by 49.5%. Oklahoma only saw a 7% sales growth on our product line. And we dominate the market in this territory with our product. Hydro Hoist invented the hydro-pneumatic boat lift on Grand Lake in northeast Oklahoma and received the first patent in the United States for the product that we specialize in. Those are very important numbers. Our product depends on lake development, marinas that are replacing docks, expanding docks, new homeowner association, new developments, just like cross timbers. If you go down to the marina this afternoon on the tour, you'll walk the docks, and in about 80% of those slips, you will see a Hydro Hoist boat lift in those. We have a partnership with Cross Timbers. So those are just some of the numbers that we look at that directly affect that growth. A staggering number. We had the presentation, Mr. Sullivan was up with GRDA, and glad to have him here. And we look at the differences between the lakes. A staggering percentage that I want you to think of in that territory I outlined. 62% of our sales in our Oklahoma territory are on Grand Lake alone. Think of all of the lakes in Kansas, all of the other lakes in Oklahoma, less Texoma, and because of the development and GRDA's management of that one lake, managed entirely different than a core managed lake, that results in 62% of one company's sales on just that one lake. I think those are pretty powerful numbers.